For our third video of Fullmetal Alchemist month, we'll be looking at the Homunculi, the main villain group within the series. Although very obviously the villains within the story, the Homunculi within the series has captured the praise from most for how varied the characters are within the group. Others have created videos on their power sets, and some even go as far as to rank them on different factors. I'll be taking a fun adaptation, imagining ways on how to kill the Homunculi just to tap that dark, sinister side of myself. I realize that the title of the video probably won't be Kill the Homunculi, which would have been my title of choice, as it seems YouTube doesn't enjoy the word kill in their videos for some reason. So let's set some ground rules. We know that the Homunculi can be killed because they were killed within the series. However, I think it'd be boring to just look at how they went down, like we were some kind of death recap, so instead I wanted to try and think of methods that I would have used to kill them if I were to unfortunately be in the same universe as them. Another rule, as a challenge to myself, I'll be pretending I'm a random soldier but not an alchemist, as that would be too easy. So let's start with the first Homunculi, Pride. As Father's first creation, Pride's true form is closest to Father's true form. Although being able to pass as a young boy, this is simply a strange avatar that Pride uses to move around, and in fact his true form is a strange shadow-like entity with appendages that he can use to bind, crush, cut, and even absorb things. As the shadows are part of himself, he can extend the shadows around and use them as his eyes and ears, being able to see things and hear things from a far distance. His trump card is the ability to devour other entities, gaining their powers and abilities to add to his own, but also take on their weaknesses. We see him eat his brother Gluttony to gain his dog-like sense of smell and his hunger pangs, as well as absorb Alchemists to quickly learn how to use alchemy. Finally, although his outer body seems small and frail, it is actually remarkably strong and durable. After being run over by a moving vehicle, he was able to get back up relatively easily, and while engaging in combat with other combat alchemists, he has shown that his physical abilities are at least on the level of a trained adult. Finally, as he is really just a mass of darkness, Pride doesn't need food, water, or even oxygen to sustain itself. So what to do against Pride? In the series, Pride was eventually taken down by Edward by exhausting him both mentally and physically, pushing his regenerative powers to the limit and finishing him by entering Pride's inner soul and crushing him from within. I don't think I'll be able to do that, to be honest, as just some dude, so let's see what other weaknesses we can exploit. We know that Pride is a mass of shadows, which can be terrifying, but also useful in imagining ways to deal with them. For shadows to exist and for Pride to be able to use his true form effectively, he needs a light source for shadows to both form, but at the same time there cannot be a light force too strong, as then shadows won't form nicely for him. We see this coming into play when Pride was able to be trapped by Hohenheim and Alphonse in a closed rock cage without a light source, rendering him stuck, trying to punch and kick the walls to no avail. And the exact opposite also happened when a flashbang went off, releasing a ton of light which made his shadows disintegrate. Another weakness we see in his normal form was revealed in the rock cage, as while we can estimate that he has strength that would seem higher than what his body suggests, that strength isn't so much more that it would seem inhumane, as he was unable to punch his way through the walls in the same way that some other characters would have probably been able to. So we have all this, but what now? Remember, I don't have any powers, I'm not some sort of superhuman, I'm really just some guy with access to tools. First, we need a place. In my opinion, the location should be some kind of closed off room with only one way in from a trap door after falling through a long tunnel straight down. The room that will contain Pride has to have no light source and to be sufficiently far from wherever the trapdoor is. But now you're wondering, how are you ever gonna get Pride there? Simple, we get there by kidnapping Miss Bradley. Now I can already hear the groans, wow, you're stooping to kidnapping? The answer to that is yes, I am stooping to kidnapping. We have seen in the series that due to how Miss Bradley had treated Pride like her own child, he has actually gained a fondness for her, and in his last moments was even found crying out for her once he's reduced to this little bean of a person. Okay, but let's suppose he's fallen into the trap after being lured by, say, a ransom note and stuck in that room. I'm literally just gonna keep throwing grenades down the chute and exploding him until he dies. There's a few reasons why I'm picking frag grenades specifically. A Molotov cocktail could potentially kill him faster by burning him alive, but as most people in fires die from asphyxiation rather than the burns, it will take surprisingly long anyway, as the Pride himself doesn't require food, water, or oxygen. The most important part, however, is that the Molotov cocktail would create a source of light that would allow Pride's shadows to work. We've seen this in some of our initial encounters with Pride's shadow form in the Briggs tunnel, where some of the scouts were able to survive because there were no light, and as a result no way for Pride's true form to materialize. A hand grenade wouldn't create any sort of light going down, so he can't create shadows in the tunnel. And even if there was a tiny spark creating some light down there, that is a very brief moment and not enough time for Pride to be able to create anything worthwhile. Would this method take a while? Actually, probably not. We know that Pride is surprisingly strong in his Selim form, but he's no physical wonder either, so while it would take a while to exhaust his regenerative powers of his Philosopher's Stone, I think this is the safest way to deal with this otherwise problematic character. While Pride is technically the oldest homunculi, physically the oldest has to be King Bradley. Until the appearance of Ling, Bradley was the only human term homunculi instead of being fully artificial like the others. After being implanted with the Philosopher's Stone, Bradley became what is essentially this universe's Captain America, being physically and mentally superior to just about any other human. That said, even with all these qualities, he falls short from most of the other homunculi, as he isn't immortal, nor does he have the crazy regenerative factor that the rest do. While this might sound reassuring, the problem lies with his left eye that he usually hides under an eye patch. What this eye is able to do is pretty much give him perfect data on the opponent, amounting to what is essentially precognition. If I were to throw a dagger at him, for example, his left eye would be able to calculate the trajectory as well as give him the cue to grab the dagger and throw it back. So that's problematic. Furthermore, because of his training that he undertook to be worthy of the Philosopher's Stone, Bradley has fighting skills that far surpasses just about any other living being in the series. Finally, the last thing to consider is that among the homunculi, Bradley is probably the smartest of the bunch, as while the others can get reckless due to them being closer to immortality, Bradley pushes his intellect to a maximum to compensate, so just about any plan I formulate would be potentially deciphered by the president. So what to do? I'll be honest, part of me wants to involve Miss Bradley again, as he had at one point stated that of all the things in his life, his wife was the only thing he chose for himself, so I imagine there's some level of emotional attachment there. Then what? If we were to redo our first plan, he would probably notice a trapdoor thanks to his eye by simply walking in, and even if he begins to drop, he always carries around those swords of his that he would use to guns the duel himself out. So you know what, I think for Bradley, I'm literally just going to outlive him. He's already in his late 50s, early 60s, so I could wait another 30-40 years and see him naturally die off, as he's not immortal, 20 years if he gets dementia or something. If you thought that was cowardly, let me tell you how I would deal with greed. So of course, there are two greeds in this series. The first is the fully artificial greed, and the second is the one that fused with Ling. For the sake of this, let's deal with Ling greed. Greed carries the same assortment of baseline powers as Pride, being immortal and having a high regenerative factor. He is superior to humans in both strength, speed, and stamina. Finally, he has his own signature ability to form the ultimate shield, which is when he hardens a part and later the entire body into graphene, making him particularly durable. In the series, Edward uses his own alchemy to transmute the graphene into graphite to make him breakable, but I'm no alchemist, so that's out of the picture. While his initial appearance showed that he used the power strictly to protect himself, as Ling he was seen using this same power to also make his body into a deadly weapon. The Ling version also has a problem in that there's also Ling himself to deal with, as if he isn't in control of the body, he can sense chi of other people, so he can feel me coming from a distance. That said, greed usually is in control, so that's a good starting point. So this will make me sound like the main character of the legendary hero is dead. I think I'm gonna use the same trapdoor trick with a kidnapped victim. For this iteration, I'm kidnapping Lan Fan. While not outright depicted as a romantic couple, we saw that Ling holds a decent amount of affection for Lan Fan. In fact, even when fused with greed, one of the few times he was able to take back control was when he felt motivated to go see a hurt Lan Fan. Apart from that, while fusing with Ling gave him a new set of powers, it also came with a cost. For the most part, it seems that his regenerative powers actually got weaker as compared to the first version of greed. Think about it, in our very first meeting with greed, we saw him ask his subordinate to cave his head in just to prove a point, but after merging with Ling, we haven't seen him exhibit anything close to that. In fact, there's a chance that he fundamentally changed, as another example where he seems more human is when Ling had taken back control of his body, he proceeded to consume large amounts of food, showing that unlike pure homunculi such as Pride, he does need sustenance to keep going. Keeping all this in mind, what I'm going to do once he's in that room deep in the ground is pour cement on him. The previous time I used this strategy, I thought about hand grenades, but as he had the ultimate shield, he could easily shake off the damage, unlike a Pride unable to form shadows. Instead, by keeping him locked in cement, I'll be able to starve him out, as we know that he does in fact need food to keep going. At the same time, I'm not worried about him breaking out, as while he's shown to have superior strength, he hasn't shown so much physical strength within the series that would suggest he could break out of cement. Let's move on to Lust. As the only feminine homunculi, Lust sports the same assortment of powers that the other artificial homunculi have, including immortality, self-sustenance, and enhanced physical abilities. Most importantly, in contrast to the last two, Lust has a regenerative factor, and considering the events that she has managed to survive prior to her demise, it may be possible that she has one of the higher ones, even among the homunculi. It would have been fine had she not met the worst compatible opponent. Her most defining feature, however, are her fingertips, nicknamed the Ultimate Spear. With them, she has shown the ability to stab and slice through pretty much anything, and she is also able to extend and retract them at will. In fact, all things considered, she's much like the X-Men's Wolverine, but pretty to look at. So how would I deal with her? Well, you already know I'm the cowardly type, so you know it's definitely not face to face. For this, we actually can learn a lot from her death. Using Flame Alchemy, Roy Mustang was able to finally exhaust her Philosopher's Stone regenerative powers and pretty much hurt her more than she can heal herself. Luckily, mankind has advanced enough to produce technology capable of achieving similar results. Introducing the flamethrower, which was first invented in 1901. By lining up flamethrower after flamethrower, my aim would be to burn her alive. Sounds awful, but some things must be done. While Lust was straightforward, one that will definitely take more brain power is Envy. As the only homunculi who went out on his own terms, we have to get creative, as the conditions that were portrayed in the series is hard to recreate considering I can't use alchemy. Envy has the same suite of baseline powers as Lust, but also has an X factor in his ability to transform himself to other people, and even more terrifyingly to a dog like Hell Beast with an even higher physical powers. Much like Cell, Lust also has three forms. The first is his base human form, which resembles a young adult. The second is the monster just described, but his third one is this tiny fetus-like form that is incredibly physically weak, but that does have the ability to suck onto living things and take over their bodies. The way he ends up dying in the series is out of his own volition after being mentally and psychologically cornered, and while you don't need alchemy to do that, I also don't have a psychology degree, so that's no help. In terms of weaknesses, there's always the Philosopher's Stone, but again, unless I get a sniper to get a clean shot on it, that's not really any help. Another is that while physically stronger than most humans in his base human form, he doesn't have any special training to make him effectively use that power. Finally, Envy is unhealthily confident and causes himself pain down the line by overlooking details in the here and now. A plan like the one I used to deal with Pride would probably not work, mainly because on the way down he could just grow in size to not fall all the way. Waiting him out like I did with Wrath and Greed would also not work, as Envy is completely artificial, and while I could probably burn him like I did Lust, he could change his form in such a way that flames would hurt but not necessarily be lethal. As such, the only viable strategy would be to find a commercial trash compactor and literally squeeze him to death. A trash compactor uses a large amount of force to compress garbage, usually to allow for more to be stored by pushing them down to size. Envy, while strong in his beast form, was only able to show his maximum strength in bursts, and commercial trash compactors are able to utilize a consistent, equal amount of force, which, with enough time, should deal with Envy nicely, or at the very least force him to downsize. Once shrunk to his human form, Envy has not shown the same strength at all, so he'll eventually be forced down to his fetus form. While the fetus form has shown the ability to merge with other beings, it is known that it cannot do so with inanimate objects or minerals. And guess what a trash compactor is? Ta-da! After a while, we'll get a nice cubic Envy. Another one with no usable kill recap information is Gluttony, because while he was killed, that was done so by Pride, so that's not really helpful for us normal people. Gluttony holds the same baseline powers as the rest of the artificial homunculi, having both superior strength, speed, and regeneration. He also is immortal and does not require food, water, or oxygen. Interestingly, however, while he doesn't need food, due to the sin he represents, Gluttony is constantly hungry and is said to have a boundless appetite. That said, he does seem to have heightened senses of smell and taste, as he can eat something and understand what he just put in his mouth is composed of, and his sense of smell also serves like a radar, as he was able to pinpoint people from a distance. His most deadly weapon is his gate, which he reveals by opening up his ribcage. From there, he is able to fire a beam that sends whatever hit into an alternate dimension. While the beam itself doesn't outright kill, as there's nothing on the other end, whoever gets hit can only really wait to die. There's a way out of that dimension by opening the real gate of truth, but remember, I'm not an alchemist, so we'll just consider that as a death sentence. Lastly, contrary to his appearance, Gluttony is surprisingly capable in combat, having been able to match individuals that would be considered proficient close combat specialists like Alphonse and Scar. In terms of weaknesses, a lot of those seem mental. If not overly hungry or given a command by his siblings or father, he is unexpectedly easy to get along with, almost like a child in a monster's body. Gluttony can shift moods quickly and has at times been convinced to stop fighting if a plausible enough reason is given to him. So how to deal with him? The whole strategy wouldn't work as he could simply fire laser beams everywhere. I can't wait him out either. I suspect that he can absorb flames, and he could definitely absorb the trash compactor. Honestly, considering we're dealing with each homunculi individually, I think there's a chance we could dupe Gluttony into joining our sides. We have seen him be convinced to stop fighting and even aid Alphonse before, and unlike most of his family, Gluttony does not seem to have an innate hatred for humans if not hungry. If we deal with the other homunculi before him, we may be able to convince him that he had, in a fit of hunger-related rage, accidentally absorbed all of them into his other dimension, and tell him that the only way to save them would be to aid us. Truthfully, it's much too hard to deal with Gluttony otherwise. So for our last plan to work, we definitely need to deal with this one. Sloth is by far the most physically imposing member of the homunculi, being multiple times larger than even the likes of Louis Armstrong. Sloth seems to not be given any special unique powers, and instead is given even more powerful versions of the baseline powers of speed, strength, and regeneration. Due to his nature, however, he is almost never seen using his physical abilities optimally. He is disgustingly durable too, as his skin is so thick that even being fired at with a rocket launcher only annoyed him. He has also declared himself to be the fastest among the homunculi, allowing him to become a meat cannonball, smashing through anything in its direction. In terms of weaknesses, his namesake is his greatest weakness. In fact, his motivations differ greatly from most within his family, as he works to not need to work anymore. While physically superior to his siblings, Sloth continuously shows that he lacks the proper coordination to make him an unstoppable fighter. His regeneration also seems to be the slowest, and similarly his mind seems to move the slowest, as he is also able to be easily fooled and tricked. The story does give us a clue on how to deal with him. While how he eventually dies is hard to recreate as a normal person, we know that until being saved by a corrupt officer, Sloth was actually dealt with nicely by putting him out in the cold, freezing him. Honestly, that wouldn't be hard to recreate, as Sloth actually would love a reason to slack, considering even his own death was partially just him giving up. Alright, thanks everybody for coming to my TED Talk on how to, checks note, unalive the homunculi. You'll notice that I didn't explain how to kill father, and well, the reason for that is, I have no idea. In every stage of his quote-unquote life, his power set has been very inconsistent. In fact, I personally think that if it were not for his story purposes, there's probably no reason why he would be able to be killed, and as obvious as this is, I am no main character material. This is the third video for Fullmetal Alchemist month. I hope you enjoyed everything released so far. I think next week will be more informational instead of me shooting the shit again, but we'll see. I'll keep that as a surprise. The last recording of our podcast on Fullmetal will come out Friday, so keep an eye on that. Alright guys, that's all from me, Yuan. Thank you for watching.